On January 2nd, in the year 1710, King Louis XIV of France was finally ready for peace. After nearly 7 decades on the throne, which to this day makes him the longest reigning sovereign monarch in history, Louis had been at war for virtually his entire life. Most recently, France had been fighting the War of Spanish Secession. This war involved nearly all of Europe's great powers: France, Spain, England, the Habsburg Empire, Prussia, and the Dutch Republic. It was triggered by the death of the childless Charles II of Spain in November of 1700. At that time, the Spanish Empire, although far past its peak, was still a dominant global power, with dominions ranging from the Spanish Netherlands, much of Italy, the Philippines, and a large portion of the Americas in the Western Hemisphere. After Charles's death, it was not clear who the true heir of the Spanish Empire was. The Austrian Habsburgs believed the right lay with them, whereas the French Bourbons viewed their claims to the throne to be more legitimate. Whoever the right truly belonged to, one thing was clear: neither the French nor the Habsburgs could allow the other to take control of the former Spanish Empire. Prior to his death, Charles II named Philip of Anjou, the grandson of Louis XIV, as his heir. If Philip refused, the alternative was Archduke Charles, the younger son of Leopold I, the Holy Roman Emperor and head of the Habsburg Empire. After Charles's death, Philip was proclaimed king of an undivided Spanish Empire on November 16, 1700. When the new Bourbon administration took over, they found the empire bankrupt and effectively defenseless, with fewer than 15,000 troops in Spain itself and a navy consisting of only 20 ships in total. This proclamation led to the War of Spanish Secession. On one side there was France and Bourbon Spain, Bavaria, Savoy, Cologne, and Liege. On the other side, the Grand Alliance, made up of the Habsburg Empire, England, Scotland, the Dutch Republic, Prussia, Portugal, and pro-Habsburg parts of Spain. This response of the Grand Alliance established the principle that dynastic rights were secondary to maintaining the balance of power between competing governments. Under Louis XIV, France was the most powerful state in Europe, with revenue-generating capacities that far exceeded its rivals. Its geographic position provided enormous tactical flexibility. Unlike Austria, it had a powerful navy, and even under severe pressure, it could defend its well-positioned borders. Apart from denying an undivided Spanish monarchy to the Grand Alliance, Louis's objectives were to secure his borders with the Holy Roman Empire, weaken Austria, and increase French commercial strength through access to trade in the Western Hemisphere. As for the British, their foreign policy was based on 3 general principles. First, and overriding all others, was to preserve a balance of power in Europe. Second, to prevent the Low Countries, modern-day Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, from being controlled by a hostile power or one stronger than Britain, such as the Spanish Netherlands and the Dutch Republic. And third, maintain a navy strong enough to protect British trade, control her waters, and launch attacks on her enemies' commercial routes and coastal areas. The third key player was, of course, the Habsburg-controlled Holy Roman Empire. Although Austria, the center of the Habsburg power, was the dominant power within the Holy Roman Empire, Austrian and imperial interests did not always coincide. Being the only continental rival to France, the Habsburgs wanted to seize control of Spanish interests. They planned to put Archduke Charles on the throne of an undivided Spanish monarchy once they defeated France in battle. This, however, was not something their allies could permit. Indeed, their allies were largely fighting to prevent either the Bourbons or the Habsburgs from doing so. They just happened to side with the Habsburgs because France was seen as more powerful. This divergence in allied interests, and in particular Austria's financial collapse in 1703, meant the campaign in Spain was reliant on Anglo-Dutch naval support, and after 1706, British funding. As is the case in many of Europe's bloody wars, Britain, being an island and therefore naturally protected both militarily and economically, played a decisive role in European politics. They were generally the primary source of funds for their continental allies, and having near naval dominance and eventually total naval dominance, were able to hugely influence the tides of war. Apart from ambitions of Spanish conquest, the priority for the Habsburgs was to secure their southern borders from French intervention in northern Italy and suppress Rákóczi's War of Independence in Hungary. The war raged for nearly 15 years. The amount of death and destruction is truly something to behold. All in all, it is believed that up to 1,251,000 people died as a direct result of the war. As it is with war, average civilians usually suffer more than anyone. we can be sure that countless thousands of the lowest strata of society died due to the indirect causes of war, whether it be famine, widespread looting, general poverty, or even just collateral deaths which were officially ignored but nonetheless took place. Early on, it looked as if the French would achieve a decisive victory. That changed, however, when they were forced on the defensive in 1706. Despite this newly won advantage, the Allies failed to make any significant progress, and the war looked to be a stalemate. In the end, after brutal fighting, 3 peace treaties were enacted: the Peace of Utrecht, the Treaties of Rastatt, and Baden. The war was at last put to an end. Philip of Anjou was, after all of that death and destruction, confirmed as the King of Spain. This was stipulated by his agreeing to renounce his own and his descendants' rights to inherit the French throne. The purpose of this was to try to maintain a general balance of power between the Bourbon and Habsburg monarchies. The Spanish Empire remained largely intact, except for its losses in Italy and the Low Countries to Austria and Savoy. The real winner in this war was England, which, after 1707, officially incorporated into the Union of Great Britain. Britain retained the newly captured territories of Gibraltar and Minorca, whose strategical importance cannot be overlooked. They also received considerable and favorable trade concessions in the Spanish Americas and took the place of the Dutch as the leading maritime and commercial European empire. Although the Dutch managed to strengthen their border territories, this proved to be nothing compared to the economic damage they incurred during the war. This was a cost which permanently damaged their economy. The Holy Roman Empire, held at that time by the Habsburgs, continued a process of decentralization, with Prussia, Bavaria, and Saxony gaining a significant amount of independence and autonomy. Also, after recent victories over the powerful Ottoman Empire, the Austrian Habsburgs increasingly pivoted their focus to southern Europe. As for France, their major achievement was in acquiring Spain as a close ally. This, however, hardly made up for the economic devastation they suffered for nearly 15 years. The economy had been set back decades. 500,000 Frenchmen had lost their lives. The average person's standard of living had been crushed, and all Louis had to show for it was a friendly alliance with Spain.